Now, border protection has jumped again to the top of the election agenda with the release of an official Operation Sovereign Borders video via YouTube to the region. According to Operation Sovereign Borders, the video was produced at their own instigation without prompting or authorisation from government in this caretaker period. And the video kind of speaks for itself.
Australia is resolute. Our border protection policies have not and will not change. No one who attempts to travel illegally by boat will settle here. No matter who you are or where you're from, our borders are closed to illegal migration. The only way to Australia is with a valid visa. You have zero chance of illegal migration.
It reminds me of 2016 when Kevin Rudd was running ads against people smugglers during the election campaign on taxpayers' money, but he was running them in Australia, trying to warn people in Australia, hey, mate, that's not where the people smugglers or their potential clients are coming from. But anyway, that video is amazing stuff. It was obviously designed to dissuade people smugglers and their potential customers. Defence Minister Peter Dutton joined me from Queensland, and I asked him when he first knew about this video and why he thought it had been produced.
Chris, great to be on the program. Well, the first I heard about this was when it was in the newspaper this morning. So it's obviously a pretty dramatic turn of events for the Department of Home Affairs or for the Australian Border Force to make a decision off their own bat to put this video out. Indicates to me, and I've worked for a number of years in the space, that there is either intelligence or actually on-water activity at the moment, which is really concerning because this is the price that we pay when there's great, prevarication and flipping and flopping, as Anthony Albanese's done on border protection. The people smugglers hear that and they market it, they package it up, they send out, little video clips to their network of clients that they think will pay money. So it's a really concerning development, and the Australian Border Force wouldn't have released this video if there wasn't something happening in the background.
Yeah, it would seem to suggest that the election debate here about border protection is being picked up in the region and they're concerned about the message that's going out there. But in the video, it says very clearly that the border protection regime will not change. But that's not actually true, is it? If Labor wins the election, temporary protection visas go, and therefore our border protection regime changes.
Well, I think that's just a reflection of the government's current policy. If there was a change of government, then there's a change of policy on Operation Sovereign Borders, and they would have to amend that video because, as you know, there are three significant pillars to the success of Operation Sovereign Borders. The central one, the most important one around temporary protection visas, Labor don't support that. Now, I know Christina KENEALLY's been out in the press in the last 24 hours. That would make position number 6 for Labor Party in the matter of a couple of weeks. They don't believe in Operation Sovereign Borders. They don't believe that they have the capacity. I mean, I'd love to see Christina KENEALLY on a lie detector test on this because I just don't believe anything she's saying. And Anthony Albanese's been all over the place on this policy, as has Richard Marles, as has Penny Wong, and they've got lots of left-wing groups within the Labor Party, within the Greens, that they're trying to please, and they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. And unfortunately, the people smugglers are hearing that, and that's a dangerous position for our country to be put in. The people smugglers know under our government you're not going to get here by boat, and that's why people haven't been arriving. But they've been hearing the flip of the coin policy of the Labor Party at the moment, and that's obviously playing out badly in the region.
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of talk, some of it I think misinformed, about the role of TPVs. Of course, Labor saying they're unnecessary now because none have been needed since the boats were stopped. But you've operated all this. You know exactly how it works. Aren't TPVs an important fallback? And importantly, without them, don't you create an added incentive to get to the Australian mainland, to trying to find a way around our patrol vessels, get to the mainland, and then you'd be guaranteed permanent residency?
Of course, Chris, you're spot on, mate, and people shouldn't forget the history of this. If you sabotage the boat and it's sinking, the plan was at one stage that you call AAO or you call the Maritime Safety Authority, you give them the coordinates of where the boat is, and the people are in the water by the time the Australian Border Force or Australian Navy vessel gets there. They hop onto the vessel, and if people are in need of medical attention, then generally in that circumstance they would have to come to the Australian mainland. And once they're, in our zone, but they're into the legal system at that stage, and it's not good enough in the court's eyes to just have somebody here without processing their particular circumstance. And you can't have indefinite detention. And this is a problem that Labor got into last time. They had 30,000 people on shore in the so-called legacy caseload, as you'd remember. And once those people of 30,000 received a permanent visa under the Labor model, the people smugglers, start popping the champagne corks, because it's at that stage that they can then market. Look, it's taken you a couple of years, it hasn't been pleasant, but you've now got a pathway to permanent residency and to Australian citizenship. And that's why the temporary protection visa was so important, so that we could say to people out of Sri Lanka, for example, that when the war is over, when the civil war is over in Sri Lanka, you can go back. You don't any longer face persecution, and we did that. But under Labor's model, people get here, they're given a permanent protection visa because they don't believe in the central pillar of Operation Sovereign Borders, that is the issuance of a temporary protection visa, and then it starts over. And as we know, the economic consequence of losing control of our borders is phenomenal, Chris. The Labor Party spent $16 billion on their mess around border protection. That's money that you could be spending helping people with cost of living pressures. It's money that you could be spending on education, on policing, on defence. There are many things that you could spend that money on, but under Labor, they always deprioritise spending in defence, and they always lose control of our borders, which means you have the huge economic impact in a negative way on the budget.
I just can't get my head around it. Having scrapped TPVs once before in 2008 and seeing what it did, I just can't understand why Labor would toy with any of this again for all kinds of reasons, primarily the humanitarian ones. But you mentioned defence spending there. We've got Russia on the march in Europe. We've got China belligerent and sabre-rattling in our own region. Have past decades of defence procurement problems and slackness, I suppose, left Australia dangerously exposed?
Well, Chris, as you know, Labor did strip money out of not just defence, but they took money away from ASIO, they took money away from the Australian Federal Police, from Border Force. We've restored the funding into the budget. We've also put a record amount into defence. And yes, I would love to be in a position where today I was commissioning a boat, a ship or a submarine that had been ordered by Kevin Rudd or Julia Gillard when Anthony Albanese was the Deputy Prime Minister. So it does make it harder for our country to keep our defences up. And if you don't manage the economy well, if you don't manage the budget well, then you can't afford to keep our country safe. You can't afford to keep the money going into ASIO, which has done a phenomenal work to keep us safe from terrorist attacks. They've excluded people from our country who are involved in espionage activity and foreign interference activities, trying to interfere with election outcomes and the like. So that's, let's distill it back to the basics. If you don't manage the economy well, if you run up the sort of situation that Labor Party did in border protection, then you have cost blowouts, and it just means you can't manage the rest of the budget.
Look, I think the AUKUS deal is the most significant step forward in our defence capabilities and our foreign policy in many a year, and I've supported it strongly. Obviously, it's based around nuclear-powered submarines, but a lot more technology, military technology and sharing as well between Australia, the US and UK. It intrigues me what this does to our relationship with New Zealand, though. Of course, they kind of stepped out of ANZUS effectively over their nuclear vessel ban back in the 1980s. Now, in the future, they'll have to ban Australian nuclear-powered submarines from their waters. Is it time for New Zealand to get over this ridiculous, out-of-date ban on nuclear-powered vessels?
Well, Chris, we've got an excellent relationship with the New Zealanders, as you know, and I met with my counterpart only just before the election, in fact, and they want to work even more closely with us as we do with them. They're very complimentary of the work being done under AUKUS. They understand the situation in the Indo-Pacific and that China is a very different country under President Xi. There's a lot of work that we're doing together in the intelligence space, and that will continue. And I think you'll see nothing but a prospering of that relationship. And along with Canada as well, obviously Canada, the United States, the UK, New Zealand, ourselves, part of a very important gathering in the Five Eyes community. Both Canada and New Zealand are, very keen to become more involved in the AUKUS arrangement. And as we know, the United States hasn't shared that technology about the nuclear propulsion system on the submarine since 1958 with the UK. They've not shared it with anyone else, and I don't think they will ever into the future. So it's a very important compact that we've got in AUKUS. I think it underpins the security of our country for decades to come. And as you point out, it's not just in the submarine space. In the budget, we've put $10 billion into cyber security, and the relationship with the partners, the very important partners in the UK and the US, because as we know, in the cyberspace, we saw attacks by Russia on the Ukraine in the opening weeks, attempts to degrade their weapon systems, attack their defence department, but also their banking system as well. So being able to collaborate with the US and the UK on the cyber front and that fight, that's truly important to keeping our country safe as well.
And just also on AUKUS, the Prime Minister of Solomon Islands, Manasseh Sogavare, has used this as an excuse, I suppose, to not inform Australia about his secret security deal with China. He says that Solomon Islands wasn't consulted on AUKUS, therefore why should he have consulted Australia on a security deal with China? Your response to that?
Well, Chris, we obviously reached out to all of our near neighbours, but before the announcement, it was really only the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia that were privy to that conversation, to those negotiations. As you recall, at the time, the French were quite aggrieved by the decision that we made, but it was necessary in our country's best interest, and I think too in the region's best interest, for us to be able to maintain stability and peace in our region, which is to the benefit of our country, but to many other countries, including the Solomon Islands, to maintain that peace and to not be in a situation where we're surrendering our sovereignty or we're in an unstable environment. We want peace and stability for our country and for our neighbours as well. And it wasn't possible to share that intelligence, that information ahead of the announcement that we made. And, there was good reason for that. But we've been able to engage very closely and in a constructive way with all of our near neighbours. Maurice Payne and I had been to Indonesia. Obviously, it was difficult to travel because of COVID, but there are many countries that we've reached out to and that the High Commissions have engaged in as much detail as we're able to share.
Peter Dutton, thanks for joining us. It's the halfway mark of the campaign. Good luck for the second half.
Thanks, Chris. Hopefully I don't look too exhausted, but look forward to catching up with you soon, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, the Defence Minister, Peter Dutton, there got plenty happening in his space. Now,